Sarah Martinez walked through the glass doors of Sterling Technologies for the first time on a crisp Monday morning. The building was impressive, with its sleek marble floors and modern furniture that screamed success. She wore a simple navy blue dress and carried a worn leather bag that had seen better days. Her long, dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she had applied just enough makeup to look professional. As she approached the reception desk, Sarah noticed how everyone around her seemed to move with purpose. Men in expensive suits talked loudly on their phones, while women in designer outfits clicked past in high heels. The atmosphere was charged with ambition and money. "Good morning," Sarah said to the receptionist, a blonde woman with perfectly manicured nails. "I'm Sarah Martinez. I'm starting today in the marketing department." The receptionist looked her up and down with barely concealed judgment. "Oh, yes, you're the new hire. Take the elevator to the 15th floor. Ask for Janet Williams. She'll show you around." Sarah thanked her and headed to the elevators. As she waited, she overheard two women talking nearby. "Did you see the new girl?" one whispered. "She looks like she shops at discount stores." "I heard they hired her from some small company nobody's ever heard of," the other replied. "I don't know what management was thinking." Sarah pretended not to hear, but their words stung. She had worked hard to get this position at one of the city's most prestigious technology companies. Her previous job at a non-profit had been fulfilling, but the pay was barely enough to cover her basic expenses. When Sterling Technologies offered her a marketing coordinator position, she saw it as a chance to finally build a stable career. The elevator doors opened, and Sarah stepped inside with several other employees. The silence was uncomfortable, and she could feel their eyes on her modest outfit. When the doors opened on the 15th floor, she was relieved to escape their scrutiny. Janet Williams turned out to be a kind woman in her 50s who welcomed Sarah warmly. She showed her to a small cubicle in the corner of the marketing department and introduced her to her immediate teammates. Most of them seemed friendly enough, offering brief hellos before returning to their work. "Don't worry about the fancy crowd," Janet whispered as she handed Sarah her employee handbook. "They're all bark and no bite." "You'll do fine here." Sarah spent her first morning filling out paperwork and learning about the company's various projects. Sterling Technologies was a major player in software development, with clients ranging from small businesses to Fortune 500 companies. The company had been founded 20 years ago and had grown from a small startup to a corporation worth billions. At lunchtime, Sarah made her way to the company cafeteria. The space was as impressive as the rest of the building, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and several food stations offering everything from sushi to gourmet sandwiches. Sarah opted for a simple salad and found a small table near the window. That's when she first encountered Victoria Chen. Victoria was impossible to miss. She wore a white designer blazer that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent, and her jet-black hair was styled in a perfect bob. Diamond earrings sparkled as she moved, and her makeup was applied with professional precision. She was surrounded by a group of equally well-dressed colleagues who hung on her every word. "Marketing is really going downhill," Victoria was saying, loud enough for half the cafeteria to hear. "They're hiring anyone these days. Standards have completely dropped." Her companions laughed appreciatively. Sarah tried to focus on her salad, but Victoria's voice carried clearly across the space. "I saw the new girl this morning," Victoria continued. "She looks like she got dressed in the dark. I mean, where do they even find these people?" "It's embarrassing for the company's image." Sarah's cheeks burned with embarrassment. She was certain Victoria was talking about her, though they hadn't been formally introduced. She finished her lunch quickly and returned to her desk, hoping to avoid any further encounters. Unfortunately, Victoria Chen worked in the business development department, which was closely connected to marketing. Over the next few days, Sarah found herself crossing paths with Victoria regularly. Each encounter was more uncomfortable than the last. During a joint meeting between the marketing and business development teams, Victoria made pointed comments about maintaining professional standards while looking directly at Sarah. When Sarah presented her ideas for a new client campaign, Victoria interrupted with dismissive remarks about inexperienced perspectives. "I think we need to consider whether everyone on this team has the background necessary to represent Sterling Technologies," Victoria said during one meeting. "Our clients expect a certain level of sophistication." Sarah's supervisor, Janet, defended her work and praised her fresh ideas, but Victoria's comments created an atmosphere of tension. Other employees began to whisper, and Sarah noticed some of her colleagues treating her differently. Some were sympathetic, but others seemed to agree with Victoria's assessment. The situation came to a head during the company's monthly networking event. These gatherings were held in the building's top-floor conference room and were attended by employees from all departments. Sarah had been looking forward to the opportunity to meet people from other areas of the company and learn more about Sterling Technologies' various projects. She arrived at the event wearing her best dress, a black number she had bought for job interviews. While not designer quality, it was professional and flattering. Sarah helped herself to some refreshments and tried to mingle with small groups of employees. Victoria Chen made her entrance 20 minutes later, wearing a stunning red dress that turned heads throughout the room. She was accompanied by several other executives, all of whom commanded attention as they moved through the crowd. Sarah watched from across the room, admiring Victoria's confidence despite their difficult interactions. "Sarah, right?" a voice said beside her. She turned to find Marcus Thompson, a senior developer she had met briefly during her first week. "How are you settling in?" "Pretty well, thanks," Sarah replied, grateful for the friendly conversation. "Everyone's been very helpful." "Good to hear. I know it can be intimidating starting at a place like Sterling. Lots of big personalities around here." Marcus gestured discreetly toward Victoria's group. "Some bigger than others." Before Sarah could respond, Victoria's voice cut through the general conversation in the room. "Oh my goodness, is that the new marketing hire?" Victoria said loudly, causing several nearby conversations to stop. "Sarah, isn't it? I hardly recognized you all dressed up." Sarah felt every eye in the room turn toward her. Victoria approached with her group of followers, her smile sharp and predatory. "How are you finding Sterling Technologies?" Victoria continued, her tone saccharine. "It must be quite an adjustment from wherever you worked before. What was it? A non-profit?" "Yes, I worked for Community Outreach Partners," Sarah replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "It was very rewarding work." Victoria's laugh was like breaking glass. "Oh, how noble. But you must be so excited to finally work for a real company, with real budgets and real clients who expect real results." The implied insult was clear to everyone within earshot. Sarah felt her face flush, but before she could respond, Victoria continued. "I hope you don't mind me saying, but you might want to consider updating your wardrobe. First impressions matter so much in business, and our clients expect a certain level of presentation from Sterling employees." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah was acutely aware of everyone staring at her, waiting for her response. Her mind raced, searching for the right words that wouldn't make the situation worse. "I appreciate the feedback," Sarah managed to say, her voice quieter than she intended. Victoria's smile widened. "Of course, dear. We all want you to succeed here. It's just that standards at Sterling are quite high. I'm sure you understand." The conversation around them gradually resumed, but Sarah felt exposed and humiliated. She excused herself and made her way to the restroom, where she stared at her reflection in the mirror. The dress she had been proud of suddenly seemed shabby and inadequate. Victoria's words echoed in her mind, each one a fresh cut to her confidence. When she returned to the event, Sarah kept to herself, speaking only when spoken to. She left as early as she could without seeming rude, making polite excuses about an early morning meeting. Over the following weeks, Victoria's behavior escalated. She made cutting remarks about Sarah's presentations in meetings, questioned her qualifications in front of clients, and consistently undermined her contributions to team projects. The worst part was how subtle Victoria was about it, always maintaining a veneer of professionalism that made it difficult for Sarah to complain without seeming oversensitive. "Maybe you should consider asking for some additional training," Victoria suggested during one particularly brutal meeting. Not everyone comes to Sterling with the background our clients expect. Sarah's colleagues began to treat her with a mixture of pity and avoidance. Some seemed genuinely sympathetic, but were clearly reluctant to get involved in what appeared to be a one-sided conflict. Others seemed to enjoy the drama, whispering among themselves whenever Sarah passed by. The situation affected Sarah's work performance. She found herself second-guessing every decision, over-preparing for meetings, and walking on eggshells whenever Victoria was around. Her confidence, which had been building steadily during her first weeks at Sterling, crumbled under the constant criticism. Janet Williams tried to be supportive, praising Sarah's work and encouraging her to ignore the office politics. "Victoria Chen has always been difficult," Janet confided during a private conversation. "She thinks she runs this place because she went to an Ivy League school and drives an expensive car. Don't let her get to you." But ignoring Victoria proved impossible. She seemed to be everywhere, always ready with a cutting remark or dismissive gesture. During client presentations, Victoria would interrupt with corrections that made Sarah look incompetent. In team meetings, she would sigh dramatically whenever Sarah spoke, as if enduring a painful inconvenience. The breaking point came during a presentation to a major prospective client. Sarah had worked for weeks preparing a comprehensive marketing strategy for their account. She was proud of the research she had done and the innovative approaches she had developed. The presentation was scheduled for Friday afternoon, and several senior executives would be attending. Victoria arrived at the conference room just as the meeting was about to begin. She took a seat directly across from Sarah, her expression one of barely concealed skepticism. As Sarah began her presentation, Victoria made a show of checking her phone and whispering to the colleague beside her. "I'm sorry," Victoria interrupted halfway through Sarah's presentation, "but I think we need to address the elephant in the room. Are we really comfortable having someone with such limited experience presenting to a client of this caliber?" The room fell silent. Sarah stood frozen at the front of the conference room, her presentation remote still in her hand. The client representatives looked confused and uncomfortable, while her Sterling colleagues shifted in their seats. "What I mean," Victoria continued, her voice filled with false concern, "is that this client deserves our absolute best. They're considering a multi-million-dollar contract with us. Shouldn't we have someone with more relevant experience handling their account?" Sarah felt her world crumble around her. All her hard work, all her preparation, was being dismissed in front of everyone who mattered. She looked around the room for support, but saw only uncomfortable faces and averted eyes. "Victoria, I think Sarah has done excellent work on this proposal," Janet Williams said firmly, but her voice seemed to come from far away. "Oh, I'm sure she's done her best," Victoria replied with a patronizing smile. "But is her best really what Sterling Technologies should be offering to our most important clients?" Sarah's hands trembled as she set down the presentation remote. The room seemed to spin around her, and she could feel tears threatening to spill. This was more than just workplace bullying. This was character assassination in front of people who could destroy her career. The client meeting ended awkwardly, with promises to follow up later. As people filed out of the conference room, Sarah gathered her materials with shaking hands. She had never felt more alone or more defeated. What Sarah didn't know was that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. The truth about who she really was would soon turn Victoria Chen's world upside down, and everyone at Sterling Technologies would see just how wrong they had been about the quiet woman in the corner cubicle. The weekend after the disastrous client presentation gave Sarah time to think, but not to heal. She spent Saturday morning in her small apartment, staring at her laptop screen and wondering if she should start looking for another job. The humiliation Victoria had subjected her to felt like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her husband. "How was the presentation? Sorry I couldn't call earlier. Board meeting ran late." Sarah stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, "It went fine. Hope your meeting went well too." She couldn't bring herself to tell him what had really happened. David was already working such long hours trying to get his new project off the ground. The last thing he needed was to worry about her workplace drama. Monday morning arrived too soon. Sarah dressed carefully, choosing a conservative gray suit she had bought during her job search. If Victoria was going to criticize her appearance, at least she would give her less ammunition. As she walked through the office, she noticed the whispers and sideways glances from her colleagues. Word of Friday's meeting had clearly spread throughout the company. "Sarah?" Janet Williams approached her desk with a concerned expression. "Could I see you in my office for a moment?" Sarah's heart sank. She followed Janet down the hall, preparing herself for the conversation she had been dreading. "Sit down," Janet said, closing the door behind them. "I want to talk about what happened on Friday. I know it didn't go well," Sarah began, but Janet held up a hand to stop her. "What happened on Friday was completely inappropriate," Janet said firmly. "Victoria had no right to undermine you like that in front of clients. I've spoken to my supervisor about it, and we're looking into the situation." Sarah felt a flicker of hope. "Thank you for supporting me. I know my presentation wasn't perfect, but I really did put a lot of work into it." "Your presentation was excellent," Janet assured her. "The clients were impressed with your research and creative approach. Victoria's behavior reflected poorly on the entire company, not on you." As the week progressed, Sarah tried to focus on her work and ignore Victoria's continued presence. But Victoria seemed determined to make her life miserable. She questioned Sarah's decisions in front of other team members, made snide comments about her background during meetings, and consistently treated her as if she were an incompetent intern rather than a qualified professional. The situation reached a new low during the company's quarterly review meeting. All department heads gathered in the main conference room to present their team's achievements and discuss upcoming projects. Sarah wasn't required to attend, but Janet invited her to observe and learn about the company's broader operations. Victoria took the opportunity to make her most cutting remarks yet. "I think we need to address the quality control issues we've been experiencing in our client-facing teams," Victoria announced during her presentation. "We've had some concerning incidents where inexperienced staff members have been put in situations beyond their capabilities." She clicked to her next slide, which showed statistics about client satisfaction scores. "While most of our metrics remain strong, we've seen some concerning dips in areas where we've lowered our hiring standards." The implication was crystal clear. Sarah felt her face burn with embarrassment as executives around the table nodded thoughtfully. Victoria was essentially arguing that hiring people like Sarah was hurting the company's reputation. "Perhaps we should consider implementing additional screening processes," Victoria continued, "to ensure that all client-facing employees meet our traditional standards of excellence." After the meeting, Sarah overheard two executives discussing Victoria's presentation in the hallway. "She makes some valid points about maintaining standards," one said. "Victoria always has her finger on the pulse of these issues," the other agreed. "She's one of our most valuable employees." Sarah felt invisible and worthless. It seemed like Victoria's campaign against her was succeeding. People were beginning to see her as a mistake, a hiring decision that should never have been made. That afternoon, Sarah was working at her desk when she received an unexpected visitor. A tall man in his early 50s approached her cubicle, wearing a casual button-down shirt and khakis rather than the expensive suits most executives favored. "Excuse me, are you Sarah Martinez?" he asked with a warm smile. "Yes, that's me," Sarah replied, looking up from her computer. "I'm Robert Sterling," he said, extending his hand. "I wanted to stop by and introduce myself." Sarah's eyes widened. Robert Sterling was the founder and CEO of Sterling Technologies, one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the city. She had seen his photo in company newsletters and business magazines, but she never expected him to visit her cubicle personally. "It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Sterling," Sarah said, standing up quickly and shaking his hand. "Please, call me Robert," he said. "I've been hearing good things about your work from Janet Williams. She tells me you've brought some fresh perspectives to our marketing team." Sarah was stunned. After the week she'd had, the last thing she expected was praise from the company's founder. "Thank you, sir. Robert. I'm really enjoying working here." "I'm glad to hear it," Robert said. "You know, I always make it a point to meet new employees who show exceptional promise. Janet spoke very highly of your presentation last Friday." Sarah's confusion must have shown on her face because Robert's expression shifted slightly. "I hope you know that what happened in that meeting was completely unacceptable," Robert continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "That kind of behavior doesn't reflect Sterling Technologies' values." Before Sarah could respond, Victoria's voice cut through the air. "Robert, what a wonderful surprise to see you down here." Victoria had appeared seemingly out of nowhere, her smile bright and confident. She moved toward them with the fluid grace of someone who was completely comfortable in the presence of power. "Hello, Victoria," Robert replied politely, but Sarah noticed his demeanor had cooled noticeably. "I was just telling some colleagues about how important it is to maintain our company's reputation for excellence," Victoria said, glancing meaningfully at Sarah. "I'm sure you agree that we need to be careful about the image we present to our clients." "I absolutely agree," Robert said, his voice measured, "which is why I'm always concerned when I hear about employees who don't treat their colleagues with respect." Victoria's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Of course, professional courtesy is so important." "Yes, it is," Robert said firmly. "Sarah, I hope we can continue this conversation soon. I'd like to hear more about your ideas for the Henderson account." After Robert left, Victoria's mask of professionalism slipped completely. "Well," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "aren't you the special one, getting personal visits from the CEO?" Sarah didn't respond, but Victoria wasn't finished. "Don't think this changes anything," Victoria continued, lowering her voice so only Sarah could hear. "Robert Sterling has always been too soft when it comes to personnel decisions. He doesn't understand that maintaining standards sometimes requires making difficult choices." Over the next few days, Victoria's behavior became even more vindictive. She seemed to take Robert's visit as a personal challenge, doubling down on her efforts to undermine Sarah's credibility. She questioned every suggestion Sarah made in meetings, criticized her work in front of clients, and made increasingly pointed comments about inappropriate hiring decisions. The stress was taking its toll on Sarah. She found herself losing sleep, constantly worried about the next confrontation. Her confidence, which had been slowly rebuilding after Robert's visit, crumbled under Victoria's relentless assault. Things got worse when Victoria began involving other employees in her campaign. She started holding informal meetings with other department heads, expressing her concerns about the company's hiring practices. She organized coffee breaks and lunch gatherings where she would subtly but consistently tear down Sarah's reputation. "I'm just worried about our clients," Victoria would say with false concern. "They expect a certain level of sophistication from Sterling employees. We can't afford to have anyone representing us who doesn't meet those expectations." Some employees bought into Victoria's narrative. They began treating Sarah with barely concealed condescension, speaking to her slowly as if she couldn't understand complex concepts, and excluding her from important discussions. Others, however, began to see through Victoria's behavior. Marcus Thompson from the development team approached Sarah one afternoon with a sympathetic expression. "I wanted you to know that not everyone agrees with what's been happening," he said quietly. "Victoria Chen has always been a difficult person, but lately she's been particularly nasty. It's not right." Sarah appreciated the support, but it felt like too little too late. Victoria's influence was growing, and Sarah felt increasingly isolated and powerless. The breaking point came during a company-wide meeting about Sterling Technologies' upcoming 20th anniversary celebration. The event was scheduled for the following month and would include clients, partners, and employees from all levels of the company. Victoria had been put in charge of organizing the event, a role that gave her even more visibility and influence within the company. During the planning meeting, she outlined her vision for a sophisticated celebration that would showcase Sterling Technologies' success and prestige. "We want to make sure everyone who attends understands the caliber of people who work at Sterling," Victoria explained to the assembled team. "This is our opportunity to demonstrate why we're the premier technology company in the city." She clicked to her next slide, which showed the guest list and seating arrangements. "I've been very careful about which employees will be interacting with our most important clients," Victoria continued. "We need to ensure that everyone representing the company makes the right impression." Sarah noticed that her name was not on the list of employees who would be attending the main dinner. Instead, she was assigned to help with registration and coat check duties. "Excuse me," Sarah said, raising her hand hesitantly. "I noticed I'm not listed for the dinner portion of the event. Is that correct?" Victoria's smile was razor-sharp. "Yes, that's correct. We felt it would be best to have our most experienced employees interacting with the VIP guests. I'm sure you understand." The message was clear. Sarah wasn't considered important enough or professional enough to represent Sterling Technologies at its most prestigious event. She felt humiliated all over again, this time in front of representatives from every department in the company. After the meeting, Sarah sat at her desk feeling defeated. She had tried to prove herself, tried to rise above Victoria's petty cruelty, but it seemed like nothing she did mattered. Victoria had successfully painted her as an incompetent outsider who didn't belong at Sterling Technologies. That evening, Sarah finally broke down and told her husband what had been happening at work. She sat in their small kitchen, tears streaming down her face as she described the months of humiliation and professional sabotage. "I don't understand why she hates me so much," Sarah sobbed. "I've never done anything to hurt her. I just want to do my job." David listened with growing anger, his jaw tightening with each new detail of Victoria's behavior. "This is completely unacceptable," he said when Sarah finished her story. "No one should have to endure that kind of treatment at work." "I don't know what to do," Sarah admitted. "I feel like I'm trapped. If I complain too much, I'll look like a troublemaker. But I can't keep living like this." David pulled her into his arms, holding her as she cried. "Something needs to be done about this Victoria person," he said, his voice filled with quiet determination. "She's crossed a line." What Sarah didn't realize was that David had already decided to take action. As she slept that night, exhausted from weeks of stress and humiliation, he sat at his computer researching everything he could find about Victoria Chen and Sterling Technologies. By morning, David had made a decision that would change everything. The time had come to reveal a truth that would turn Victoria's world upside down and show everyone at Sterling Technologies exactly who they had been dealing with. The company's 20th anniversary celebration was still weeks away, but David Sterling had no intention of waiting that long to address the situation. His wife had suffered enough, and Victoria Chen was about to learn a lesson she would never forget. David Sterling arrived at Sterling Technologies at exactly 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning. He walked through the glass doors with the quiet confidence of someone who knew every corner of the building intimately. The security guard nodded respectfully as David badged in, and several employees smiled and greeted him warmly as he made his way to the elevator. Sarah was at her desk, trying to focus on a marketing report despite her emotional exhaustion from the night before. She had called in sick on Monday, unable to face another day of Victoria's cruelty, but she knew she couldn't hide forever. As she worked, she noticed an unusual buzz of activity around the office. People seemed more energetic than usual, whispering excitedly in small groups. "Did you hear David Sterling is in the building?" she overheard one colleague saying. "I saw him getting off the elevator on the executive floor," another replied. "He looks just like his father." Sarah looked up from her computer, confused. She knew Robert Sterling had founded the company, but she had never heard of David Sterling. The name seemed familiar, but she couldn't place where she had heard it before. Meanwhile, 20 floors above, David was sitting in his father's office, his face grim as he recounted everything Sarah had told him the night before. "She's been dealing with this for months, Dad," David said, pacing back and forth in front of the large windows that overlooked the city. "This Victoria Chen person has systematically tried to destroy her confidence and credibility." Robert Sterling leaned back in his leather chair, his expression growing darker with each detail. "I knew something was wrong when I visited her last week. She seemed defeated. Nothing like the confident woman you described when you first told me about her." "I should have intervened sooner," David said, running his hands through his hair. "Sarah didn't want me to get involved. She was so proud of getting this job on her own merits. She made me promise not to tell anyone at the company that we're married." "And I respected that," Robert replied. "When you told me she was applying here, I made sure to stay completely out of the hiring process. Janet Williams selected her purely based on her qualifications." David stopped pacing and faced his father. "Well, the time for staying neutral is over. What Victoria Chen has done crosses every line of professional behavior. Sarah is my wife, but more importantly, she's a valuable employee who's been subjected to workplace harassment and bullying." Robert nodded grimly. "I've been getting reports about Victoria's behavior from other employees, too. This isn't just about Sarah. Victoria has created a toxic environment that affects the entire company culture." "What do we do about it?" David asked. "We handle this the right way," Robert said, reaching for his phone. "HR first, then a full investigation. But I think it's time Victoria Chen learned exactly who she's been tormenting." An hour later, Victoria was called to Robert Sterling's office for what she assumed would be a routine meeting. She had requested the appointment herself, planning to make another subtle case for raising the standards in the company's hiring practices. She arrived wearing her most expensive suit and her most confident smile. "Robert, thank you for making time to see me," Victoria said as she entered the office. "I know how busy you must be." "Please sit down," Robert replied, his tone cooler than usual. Victoria noticed another man sitting in one of the chairs facing the desk, but she didn't recognize him. "Victoria, I'd like you to meet my son, David Sterling," Robert said. "David is our Chief Technology Officer and heads up our software development division." Victoria's smile brightened. She had heard about David Sterling but had never met him in person. This was an even better opportunity than she had hoped for. "What a pleasure to meet you," Victoria said, extending her hand. "I've heard wonderful things about your work with the company." David shook her hand politely, but didn't return her smile. "I wish I could say the same about you, Ms. Chen." Victoria's expression faltered slightly. "I'm sorry?" "We've called you here to discuss some serious concerns about your behavior toward other employees," Robert said, his voice taking on a formal tone. "Specifically, your treatment of Sarah Martinez." Victoria's stomach dropped, but she quickly composed herself. "I'm not sure what you mean." I've always tried to maintain the highest professional standards. Is that what you call it? David asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Professional standards? Victoria looked back and forth between the two men, suddenly aware that this meeting was not going as she had planned. I understand there may have been some miscommunication, Victoria said carefully. Sarah is new to the corporate environment, and I may have been too direct in my feedback. I was only trying to help her improve. Help her improve? David repeated, standing up from his chair. By humiliating her in front of clients? By excluding her from important meetings? By consistently undermining her work and questioning her qualifications? Victoria's face went pale. I think there may have been some misunderstandings about my intentions. Let me clear up any misunderstanding you might have, David said, moving closer to Victoria's chair. Sarah Martinez isn't just another employee, she's my wife. The color drained completely from Victoria's face. Her mouth opened and closed silently as the implications of David's words sank in. That's right, David continued, his voice filled with controlled anger. The woman you've been tormenting for months, the woman whose appearance you've mocked and whose qualifications you've questioned, is married to the chief technology officer of this company. Victoria looked desperately at Robert Sterling, hoping to find some sign that this was a mistake or a joke. Instead, she saw only cold disappointment. David and Sarah chose to keep their relationship private, Robert explained. They wanted Sarah to succeed on her own merits, without any appearance of nepotism, and she has succeeded. Her work has been exemplary. I had no idea, Victoria stammered. If you had known, you would have treated her differently, David interrupted. So you only show respect to people based on their connections rather than their worth as human beings? Victoria tried to speak, but no words came out. The full weight of her behavior over the past months was crashing down on her. Every snide comment, every dismissive gesture, every attempt to humiliate Sarah was now revealed as an attack on the founder's daughter-in-law. Let me tell you what's going to happen, Robert said, leaning forward in his chair. HR has been conducting a full investigation into your behavior, not just toward Sarah, but toward other employees as well. We've found a pattern of bullying, harassment, and discrimination that goes back years. Victoria's hands began to shake. Please, let me explain. I can change. I can do better. You've had plenty of opportunities to do better, David said. Instead, you chose to target my wife because she didn't fit your narrow definition of what a Sterling Technologies employee should look like. Your behavior has created a hostile work environment, Robert continued. You've damaged team morale, undermined company values, and potentially exposed us to serious legal liability. This isn't just about one employee anymore. This is about the kind of company we want to be. Victoria realized her career was over. All her years of climbing the corporate ladder, all her carefully cultivated image and connections were crumbling around her. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears beginning to form in her eyes. I'm truly sorry. Your apology is too little, too late, David replied. Sarah has endured months of your abuse. She's lost sleep, questioned her abilities, and suffered emotional distress because of your actions. Effective immediately. Your employment with Sterling Technologies is terminated, Robert announced. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings. You'll receive your final paycheck according to company policy, but your access to all company resources ends today. Victoria sat in stunned silence as the reality of her situation sank in. She thought about her expensive lifestyle, her luxury car, her high-end apartment. Everything was built on her Sterling Technologies salary and reputation. Now it was all gone. Furthermore, Robert continued, we'll be providing honest references to any future employers who inquire about your work here. We won't make false statements, but we also won't hide the truth about why your employment ended. As security arrived to escort Victoria from the building, she passed by Sarah's cubicle one last time. Sarah looked up from her computer, unaware of what had just transpired 20 floors above. For a moment, their eyes met, and Victoria saw nothing but quiet dignity in Sarah's gaze. No triumph, no smugness, just the same professionalism Sarah had maintained throughout months of mistreatment. Word of Victoria's termination spread through the office within hours. At first, there were whispers and speculation about what had happened. Then, gradually, the truth began to emerge. David Sterling himself came down to the marketing department that afternoon to publicly introduce himself as Sarah's husband. "I want everyone to know," David announced to the assembled staff, "that Sarah has been an exceptional employee who earned her position here through her qualifications and hard work. The fact that she's married to me had nothing to do with her hiring, and it doesn't diminish her professional accomplishments." Sarah stood beside her husband, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment but her head held high. The colleagues who had whispered about her now looked at her with new respect and no small amount of guilt. "Sarah chose to keep our relationship private because she wanted to prove herself on her own merits," David continued. "Unfortunately, some people took advantage of that privacy to treat her poorly. That behavior was unacceptable and has no place at Sterling Technologies." In the days that followed, Sarah's work life was transformed. Colleagues who had previously ignored or dismissed her now sought her out for her opinions. Projects that had been reassigned to other team members were quietly returned to her. The client whose presentation had been disrupted by Victoria specifically requested to work with Sarah after learning about her innovative marketing strategies. Janet Williams was promoted to Director of Marketing, and she immediately made Sarah her deputy. "You've earned this through your work and your grace under pressure," Janet told her during their first meeting in Sarah's new office. "Victoria's behavior toward you showed more about her character than it ever did about yours." The 20th anniversary celebration proceeded as planned, but with significant changes to the guest list and seating arrangements. Sarah found herself at the head table, beside her husband and father-in-law, being introduced to clients and partners as one of Sterling Technologies' rising stars. During his speech that evening, Robert Sterling made a point of acknowledging the company's commitment to treating all employees with respect and dignity. "Success isn't just about profits and growth," he told the assembled crowd. "It's about creating an environment where talented people can thrive regardless of their background or connections. We've learned some valuable lessons this year about the importance of maintaining our values even as we pursue excellence." Sarah's story became something of a legend within Sterling Technologies, though not in the way Victoria might have expected. It became a cautionary tale about the dangers of judging people by appearances and the importance of treating everyone with respect. New employee orientation now included specific training on workplace harassment and the company's commitment to maintaining a respectful environment for all employees. As for Victoria Chen, she struggled to find another position in the city's tight-knit business community. Word of her behavior at Sterling Technologies preceded her to job interviews, and companies were reluctant to hire someone with a reputation for creating hostile work environments. She eventually had to relocate to another city and accept a position at a much smaller firm, far from the prestigious corporate world she had once dominated. Months later, Sarah reflected on her experience during a quiet moment in her new office. The expensive furniture and city views were nice, but what mattered most was the respect she had earned from her colleagues and the knowledge that she had maintained her dignity throughout her ordeal. Her husband found her there one evening, staring out at the city lights. "Any regrets about keeping our marriage secret for so long?" David asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Sarah leaned into his embrace. "No regrets. I needed to know that I could succeed on my own. Victoria's behavior was terrible, but in a way, it proved that I belong here. I survived her worst, and I came out stronger." "I'm proud of you," David said softly. "You handled an impossible situation with more grace than she deserved." Sarah smiled. I learned something important from all of this. Success isn't about wearing the most expensive clothes or having the right connections. It's about how you treat people when you think no one important is watching. The lesson of Victoria Chen's downfall became part of Sterling Technologies' culture, a reminder that true professional excellence includes treating everyone with respect and dignity, regardless of their position or background. And Sarah Martinez Sterling became living proof that talent and character ultimately matter more than appearances or connections in determining who truly belongs in the halls of success.